For those of you who are in the gaming community, I wanted to take a moment. Do you remember the video, the incredibly compelling, almost it's horribly fascinating, of these women making animal noises and clawing at the 13-ton doors of the Supreme Court building? They were making these screeching, clawing noises and clawing, breaking their fingernails on these enormous brass doors. Well, you should know that the gaming community has figured out a meme to describe the kind of behavior we're seeing from these social justice warriors. And I'd never heard of it before, but if you've ever picked up a video game or played one that features other characters that aren't being controlled by other players, or controlled by the computer, you've run into NPCs, non-player characters. So, first one I ever saw was a Toad in Super Mario Brothers. And, well, just to show you my age, because I played Pac-Man back when it was a thing, the ghosts in Pac-Man, they're non-player characters. And there's the villagers in Skyrim. And in many cases, they're fairly complex. They've got dialogue, they've got patterns of behavior, got personality. They're just a program with a preset behavior pattern and a script, and once they go through the script, they start repeating themselves. And so often, these demonstrators start repeating themselves as well. And if you've viewed any video, or maybe you've had the courage to step onto a college campus, or walk near enough by some kind of demonstration protest to get something thrown at you, you see all these people with neon-colored hair, green and blue and whatever else, screaming at the top of their lungs about identity politics or some social concern you never heard of. And they seem to say the same thing over and over. You've run into a social justice warrior in SJW. These are people trying to beat down the Supreme Court doors. These are Antifa members threatening motorists. And you'll notice that their selection of dialogue is very, very limited. So these social justice warriors are just like the non-player characters. They've got fixed dialogue. They've got patterns of behavior. They've got patterns of personality. But the way they act, it is as if they were programmed with a preset set of behavioral patterns. And it's been decided for them by activist groups or professors or the local virtue signaling social justice. It's amazing. But I find the comparison between the non-player characters and the social justice warriors pretty striking. And frankly, hilarious. Consider, you walk past one of these demonstrations, hear someone chanting, Black Lives Matter, or hey, hey, ho, ho, insert your frame, here has got to go. No justice, no peace. They're really like NPCs. It's kind of remarkable. And when you see them being programmed by people teaching them what chant to say, here are these people that are supposed to have these strongly held views being programmed by somebody else. Their views were based on nothing. They're completely on autopilot doing what someone else told them to do. It's tremendously dehumanizing. And in the fact that when you see them do these things, they appear to be objects. They appear to be pawns, straw man, tools. And the thing about it is that they're never willing to argue a point. All they can do is shout. All they can do is sloganeer. All they can do is physically object to whatever else. And if they wanted to discuss the issue, there could be some real exchange, and this way you can get back and forth with people you disagree with and find something out. Have a conversation with people whose experiences are different from yours and are willing to discuss the matter. But these folks are not willing to discuss the matter. They apparently won't change the subject, and they can't change their minds. I find that, it presents a conundrum, because what it suggests is that the ways that we as Americans have solved our problems in discussion, in open debate, you threw all the ideas in a pile and made the best idea win. If these folks are incapable of doing that, if they don't have the capacity for rational or critical thought, and I'm sure that they do, but they've simply turned it off because they're convinced that they're right, and they don't want to have to think about this. The capacity for rational critical thought is typically part of the human equipment, but if these people choose not to use it, even in the face of undeniable fact, then the difference between them and a non-player character is just about minimal. Because, I mean, what you're seeing here, these folks are evidencing a belief system that is powered by instructions from someone else, which is the definition of a non-player character in a video game. If you won't engage in civil debate, that means you've concluded that the people you would be debating can't possibly be right. You've already judged them and found them wanting. And as such, you are using that to pump up your, well, first of all, what you could call confirmation bias is fully operational there. But part two, if you won't engage in civil debate, and instead you're going to scream pre-programmed phases at people until you run out of things to say, that's not you can't have a country based on this, because our nation goes from one election to another by virtue of discussion, civil debate, and the competition of ideas one against another. If these folks won't engage in that stuff, if all they do is scream these tired out old phrases because they don't have anything else to say, then they have essentially arrested the ongoing process that we as Americans have always believed would drive our country into the future. You do see what I'm saying, right? Maybe I'm making too thick a point. But you've got to admit, what you see from these people, they apparently are unable to consider. And when you probe them, when you ask them, how did you reach these ideas? What you discovered are that the depth of their ideas it's paper thin. You'll hear a lot of Marxist dialogue, hear a lot of Marxist slogans, but what you don't hear is a a mental understanding of how A plus B plus C equals the D that they're complaining about. And they've been dehumanized, there's no doubt about it. And they have no empathy for people whose experiences are different from theirs. And they're absolutely unwilling to consider that if a vast number of people happen to agree over something, it might be a good idea for them to think about why. Examine what has led these folks to this thing. See, that's what I've tried to do by having discussions with these folks. And many times, they can't explain how they got to where they are. Somebody told them this stuff, I guess. It sounded good to them, so they simply adopted it. Like the kid in 4th or 5th grade math, who was a good guesser and could look at a problem. I knew one kid that could do this. He could get the answer right 90% of the time, but the teacher was on to him and said, you need to show your work. He didn't want to show his work. He said, there's no reason to show my work. I've got the right answer. And she said, you need to understand how the system works, how the function of the problem should be preceded so you can understand how to solve other problems in the future. And watching these social justice warriors dismiss large swaths of people like us because they disagree with what we think, because our experiences are different from theirs, and even though at some level they may understand this, they're absolutely not willing to consider that if a good-sized number of people happen to disagree with something you're thinking, it might be a good idea to figure out why. And the level of damage, the level of erosion, the level of oxidation, the level of rust that this brings to our wonderful country and her incredible processes and traditions, it's just lethal. And I confess that I think the thing that makes me the most nervous here, that just makes me grit my teeth, I don't know how to reach folks like this. I've never seen somebody who could perceive at some level that there's a lot of folks that disagree with him. I mean, if you watch the returns, election night in 2016, especially the ones from the building in which the big Hillary celebration had been scheduled to take place, and you saw the shock and the tears and the 10,000-yard stares of all these folks who had never considered for a second that there might be a whole bunch of other people out there that don't agree with him. A whole bunch of people for whom Trump was not, he wasn't the provider. He was the result. He wasn't the problem. He was the result. And apparently none of them had ever considered for a moment there might be just an enormous number of people that did not happen to agree with him over something very, very basic, like who should be president. And because they couldn't possibly imagine that, it had never occurred to them to entertain the idea that Miss Hillary might not be the victor. And so when that became reality, and guys like Colbert and President Obama and a host of other people who had laughed and sneered and made fun, suddenly they were completely up against the wall. Didn't know how to take this. And the fact that there are so many of them who have used Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, take your pick, to allow them free association only with people that think like they do, only with thousands of other people who agree with them, whose experiences are the same. I think that's part of what makes them unwilling to consider that there might be a whole bunch of people out there who do not happen to agree. But that's always been the nature of the country. Think about the First Amendment. To peaceably petition the government for redress of grievance. That's what lobbying is. That's what debates are. That's what town halls are. That's what elections are. And we need to get with the program and make sure that system survives and is taken care of.